again, this video is going to cover reaction types as an introduction to chemical reactions. So first off, a chemical reaction is some sort of chemical occurrence that makes something new. Usually you will have two chemicals coming together to make two or more, or one or more new things. Sometimes you will have one thing breaking down into two more, but we'll get into the types here in just a moment. The major thing to notice is that we are making something new, something that was not there before. There are several different pieces of evidence that we can use to decide whether or not this is actually a chemical reaction or just some kind of physical something or another. And again, that big clue is this idea of a new substance. And there's several different forms that this new substance, quote unquote, can take. The first of them is what's called a precipitant. A precipitant is a solid that was not there before. So you start off with two liquids and you end up with a liquid and a solid. It usually looks like some sort of fuzz floating around inside your solution. Oftentimes you'll see precipitate abbreviated pt. The second piece of evidence that we can talk about is the presence of a gas that was not there before, particularly in the form of bubbles. But be careful of this one because it's not always a good indicator. For example, if you boil water, you make bubbles, but it's not a chemical reaction because you start with water, you end with water. You just change the phase. Another example might be soap bubbles. You start with soap, you end with soap. There is no chemical reaction occurring. So you have to make sure that these bubbles are in fact something new, something that was not there before. The last new substance that we can talk about is the presence of water, but again, where there was not water before. You specifically see this in neutralization reactions. Acids plus bases always yield a salt, some kind of cation plus anion, and water. Our next piece of evidence is an energy transfer of some kind. Usually this will take the form of an exothermic, so giving off heat or energy, or perhaps endothermic, which is the reverse, absorbing heat or energy. Exothermic has nothing to do with cold. There is no such thing as cold. There is simply the lack of heat. Sometimes this energy will also take the form of light or sound. If you've ever seen magnesium metal burned, it gives off a really bright light, which is that energy transfer. It's giving off energy. Our third piece of evidence is an electron transfer. Sorry for my little typo there. I lost the N somewhere in the transfer. But this happens in oxidation reduction reactions. An example of those would be batteries. Your everyday good old-fashioned batteries have electrons being transferred through a wire. This chemical reaction, those electrons are what fuel your batteries, your toys, your TV remotes, your iPad, your phone, whatever. The last piece of evidence is a color change. This one, again, it happens most of the time, but not always. For example, acid-base reactions. Throw in an indicator, changes color. That's a chemical reaction. But sometimes the color change does not indicate a chemical reaction. Again, look for something new. We have a variety of types of reactions. There are 5 of them that I'm going to talk about now. One I forgot to write, so I have to add that when we get there. So the first of the 5 is a synthesis reaction. Synthesis literally means to make. So I have 2 things becoming one. I like to use a dance analogy with chemical reactions. So I have 2 single people going to the dance and they're leaving as a couple. In this instance, I have hydrogen gas plus oxygen gas combining together to form water. Our next type of reaction is called a decomposition reaction. Decomposition means to decay or break down, and that's exactly what happens. Our one thing becomes 2. So that couple who went to the dance, well, they break up. One thing becomes 2. Third type is called a single replacement, and this is like replaces like, so someone cuts in. The more active substance replaces the less active substance. So for example, Here I have silver chloride reacting with copper, and notice my products on the other side. My copper has replaced my silver. Metal replaced metal, cation replaced cation. In my second example, magnesium oxide plus chlorine gas, notice my chlorine takes the place of my oxygen. Anion replaces anion, non-metal replaces non-metal. So someone cuts in. Like replaces like. The fourth type is called a double replacement reaction, and in this sort of reaction, everything switches. I affectionately call this the do-si-do. So all of our couples, they switch partners. Notice my calcium is with my chlorine on the left. On the right, it's my sodium with my chlorine. Make sure that you're always putting positive with a negative. In the next video, we will discuss using these types of reactions to predict the products. Our fifth and final type of reaction is called a combustion reaction. And this is sort of a generic combustion reaction. Can you see that? Yes, okay. Combustion, so this is going to be some kind of organic, so involving carbon and hydrogen. We'll say 3 and 7 for the sake of my example. And it reacts always with oxygen gas, so something burning. So look for that CHO, C-H-O, and the products are always CO2 and H2O. If you choose to write it H2O and CO2, that's fine. Also works just as well. So those are our 5 types of reactions, along with the pieces of evidence that tell us whether or not a chemical reaction has actually occurred. Check out the next video to see how to use these 5 types to predict products given the reactants.